620,000 women and girls just fled their homes in Lebanon, not soldiers, not combatants, not political leaders, women, girls, mothers, daughters, grandmothers, and almost nobody on television told you about it this week. My name is Professor Jiang. I study geopolitics and predictive military analysis, and what I am about to show you in the next 9 minutes is not just a humanitarian story. It is an analytical breakdown of a displacement crisis that changes the political trajectory of this entire war. Now let me show you what the UN Women report actually says and why nobody covered it with the analytical weight it deserves. Here is what we know. UN Women published a flash assessment this week documenting that approximately 620,000 women and girls have been displaced from their homes in Lebanon since the escalation of hostilities began. That number represents approximately 12% of Lebanon's total population. It represents approximately 40% of Lebanon's female population, and it represents the largest single demographic displacement event in the Middle East since the Syrian civil war began in 2011. These 620,000 women and girls are not displaced randomly. They are displaced from specific geographic zones: southern Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, and the southern suburbs of Beirut. These are the same zones where Israeli airstrikes have been most concentrated. These are the same zones where Hezbollah maintains its strongest operational presence. And these are the same zones where the Lebanese government has the least capacity to provide emergency shelter, medical care, or basic services to displaced populations. Now here is the number that changes everything. Of the 620,000 displaced women and girls, approximately 180,000 are heads of household. That means they are the primary caregivers for children, for elderly parents, for disabled family members. They are responsible for securing food, shelter, medical care, and safety for dependents who cannot secure these things for themselves. And they are doing this while living in temporary shelters, in overcrowded schools, in unfinished buildings, with no reliable access to electricity, clean water, or health care. 180,000 women, responsible for the survival of hundreds of thousands of additional dependents, in a country whose economy has already collapsed, in a country whose healthcare system was already operating at minimum capacity, in a country whose government has not paid its civil servants in months. That is not a humanitarian statistic. That is a structural emergency. Now I want to show you why this displacement crisis matters analytically beyond the immediate human suffering, because this is where the Professor Jiang analysis adds something that straight humanitarian reporting does not. Lebanon has 1.5 million Palestinian refugees within its borders. These refugees have lived in camps for decades. They have limited legal rights. They have restricted access to employment, healthcare, and education. And now, into this already fragile ecosystem, 620,000 additional displaced women and girls have arrived. The result is not just overcrowding. It is resource competition. It is social tension. It is political destabilization. And it is a demographic shift that changes the calculus of every government watching this conflict from the outside. Let me give you the historical pattern that tells you exactly where this goes next, because this has happened before, and the outcome was not contained within Lebanon's borders. In 1982, during the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, approximately 300,000 civilians were displaced from southern Lebanon. The humanitarian consequences of that displacement included the Sabra and Shatila massacre, the radicalization of displaced populations, and the founding of Hezbollah as a political and military force specifically in response to the displacement crisis. The displacement did not stay in Lebanon. It created a political movement that has shaped Middle Eastern geopolitics for 40 years. The displacement crisis of 2026 is larger in scale. It is occurring in a more connected and documented information environment, and it is happening in a country that was already economically destroyed before the first bomb fell. This is why the UN Women report matters beyond the humanitarian dimension, because the documentation of what is happening to women and girls in Lebanon right now is the single most powerful driver of the international political shift that is building against this war, faster than any diplomatic cable, faster than any UN resolution. The images from Lebanon are moving the global community from cautious neutrality toward active opposition to the military campaign, and that movement has a specific geopolitical consequence that I want to show you precisely. There are 57 member states in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. These countries collectively control approximately 70% of the world's proven oil reserves. They collectively represent approximately 1.8 billion people. They have collective voting power in the United Nations General Assembly, and they are watching Lebanon. Before this war started, the OIC was divided. Gulf states were cautiously aligned with American security interests. Turkey was playing a complex mediating role. Pakistan was managing its relationship with both China and America simultaneously. The humanitarian documentation coming out of Lebanon is moving all of these governments in the same direction simultaneously, not toward military confrontation, toward the withdrawal of political legitimacy from this war, toward the kind of coordinated diplomatic opposition in multilateral forums that historically forces military campaigns to either end or become permanent occupations. The UN General Assembly emergency session vote that was being prepared before this week was originally expected to pass with approximately 120 votes in favor. After 22 days of Lebanon coverage and 620,000 displaced women and girls and 1.5 million trapped refugees inside a humanitarian catastrophe, the number of expected yes votes has risen to approximately 138. That is 2/3 of the General Assembly. That is the threshold that makes a resolution politically impossible to dismiss as a narrow majority opinion. America can veto Security Council resolutions. America cannot veto General Assembly resolutions. A General Assembly resolution calling for a ceasefire does not have legal enforcement power, but it has political power. It represents the documented position of the international community, and it creates the framework within which every subsequent diplomatic negotiation occurs, including any negotiation about reopening Hormuz, including any negotiation about Iranian nuclear safeguards, including any negotiation about the terms under which this war ends. Lebanon's 620,000 displaced women and girls are not just a humanitarian tragedy. They are the political foundation being laid for the diplomatic architecture that will either enable or constrain how this war can be ended. Now I want to show you the specific dimension of this crisis that is receiving zero analytical attention. In Western media, the internal Lebanese political collapse. Lebanon's government has been functionally paralyzed since this war began. The Lebanese armed forces have explicitly refused to fight alongside Hezbollah. The Lebanese state and Hezbollah are two different entities operating in the same country simultaneously. The Lebanese armed forces are trying to protect civilian infrastructure and maintain some semblance of state authority. Hezbollah is conducting an independent military campaign using Lebanese territory. This dual authority structure means there is no single Lebanese entity with the authority and the capacity to negotiate a ceasefire on Lebanon's behalf. Israel will not negotiate with Hezbollah as a legitimate state actor. Hezbollah will not accept terms that the Lebanese armed forces agree to without Hezbollah's participation. The Lebanese government does not have authority over Hezbollah's military operations, and the international community cannot force a ceasefire on Lebanese soil because there is no single party on the Lebanese side with the authority to implement it. This is a structural trap. Lebanon is trapped between an Israeli military campaign it cannot stop and a Hezbollah military operation it cannot control. 620,000 women and girls are displaced in the gap between those two forces, and the number will keep rising as long as both sides continue because Lebanon has no mechanism to extract itself from a war between other parties being conducted on its territory. There is one more dimension I want to give you because it connects everything in this video to a practical prediction. Lebanon has the highest per capita educated diaspora of any country in the Middle East. Approximately 15 million Lebanese nationals live outside Lebanon globally, in Brazil, in the United States, in France, in Australia, in West Africa, in the Gulf states. These 15 million diaspora members are watching the Lebanon coverage. In real time, many of them have families inside Lebanon. Many of them are citizens or permanent residents of the countries whose governments are nominally allied with or supporting the military campaign. This diaspora is the political pressure mechanism that converts the humanitarian catastrophe in Lebanon into domestic political pressure in Western democracies. A Lebanese American in Michigan whose sister was displaced from southern Lebanon is a voter. A Lebanese Australian in Sydney whose mother is among the 620,000 displaced is a constituent. A Lebanese French citizen in Paris whose home village was emptied by airstrikes is a taxpayer whose government is being asked to take a position on this war. 15 million diaspora members spread across Western democracies, watching Lebanon's women and girls flee in real time and voting in elections that will occur within the next 1, 2, 3 years in every country whose government's position on this war matters. This is the human mechanism through which Lebanon's humanitarian catastrophe eventually forces a political reckoning in the countries whose governments have the most influence over how this war ends, not through protest, not through diplomatic pressure, through the ballot box, through the specific democratic accountability that makes Western governments ultimately more responsive to visible human suffering than to abstract strategic calculations. The morning shows covered this story in 4 minutes. They said UNWomen released a report. They showed a map. They moved to oil prices. They did not show you the demographic scale. They did not show you the historical precedent. They did not show you the political consequence at the UN. They did not show you what 620,000 displaced women and girls means for the diplomatic trajectory of this entire war. Now you have all of it. Subscribe right now if this gave you the analytical depth that the news cycle is not providing. Every day I take the most consequential stories in this war and show you the specific analytical layer that changes how you understand everything else you watch. Drop a comment below right now. Yes or no, did you know about the 620,000 displaced women and girls in Lebanon before watching this video? I read every single comment. I will see you tomorrow.